Good afternoon, viewers at home. Welcome to Home Learning. This is SGCSe English Language. In our previous lesson, we were looking at a narrative composition, or what is called a narrative essay. And then we looked at the outlines of writing a narrative essay. We never got into detail at what are the mechanics of writing a narrative essay. But then we looked at what is it that you need to do, what is it that is expected of you, that is the structure of a narrative essay whenever you are supposed to write one. We'll know that a narrative essay is always there in our paper 2, which is continuous writing in exercise 3. So you will find 3 of those essays that you have to write, and then you have to choose one of the 3, and that will be an argumentative normally, and it could also be a descriptive, and then there will be a narrative essay. So what we discussed of a narrative essay, remember, we said that a narrative is a story. Whenever you are supposed to write a narrative essay, we said that a narrative essay is a story, and it is a story that is told by a person. That story, it is a story that is told by a person. There we are. And then that person tells the story from a particular perspective. And then we said that the person who tells the story, we'd call them the narrator. And then in this case, you are the narrator as the writer of that particular story. And then you tell that story from a particular perspective. And then we said that that perspective from which you tell the story, basically it gives us what? The point of view. So this is the point of view that you use as the narrator to write the story. All right, it could be the first person, which you said that it is preferred that whenever you write a narrative, you should write it using the first person. You should be the main character of whatever that happens in the story. It's not necessarily the case, all right, because at times you'll be asked to do something different, to write a story that is based on someone else. But then it's always convincing and more easy to write a story that is based on you, where you are the main character there in the story. The things that are happening in the story, they happen to you. You get to experience those things. It is easy for the readers to empathize with you in whatever that befalls you in your story. And then it becomes more interesting because it is about you. And of course, you're going to have other characters in the story that are going to influence whatever outcome that you're going to have. But then you should be the main character. You should be the protagonist here in the story. So that is a perspective from which you can tell a story. That is basically the point of view. You can use either the third person or the second person, or rather the first person. So, and then again, it is still a narrative. It is a story that is told by a particular person from a particular perspective, and it involves a logical sequence of events. We said that logical sequence of events basically means that whenever you create the story, tell us the events that make up the story and make sure that you present them in a certain chronology. So present them using a chronological order. Present the story such that it is easy to follow that, okay, fine, this happened, and then after that, this is what happened. And remember, we said that for you to achieve this, you need to be able to use what you call the time fixers or time adverbials. And then again, we went on to say that a narrative, it is a story that is carried out by certain individuals, which basically means that these individuals are the characters that you create for your story. So these are the characters, and the characters are the people that you decide to include, that they live in the story, the people that affect whatever outcome that is there. And then we said that be careful to select, when you select the people, it shouldn't be so many characters in your story, but then it should be those that play an important role or a vital role in the outcome of your story. And then again, we continue to say that a narrative, it is a story that is carried out by certain individuals who are in a specific time and place. So basically, the specific time and place, we said that this is the setting of your story. Make sure that your story is set in a place that you are able to describe. All right, so that the reader is able to follow whatever actions that are going to happen there, and they should be relative to what is around, to the surroundings that you decided to describe there, where you decided to set your story. And for the characters and the setting, we said that it is always advisable to use a local setting and also use local characters, basically local names of characters, instead of borrowing or using foreign setting and also using foreign names, because that takes away, it deprives you of your story being regarded as one that is authentic, as one that is original. All right, it's like it has been lifted from somewhere in a novel or from somewhere from a movie or wherever. So if you use local names, the names that we are familiar to here in Swaziland, there's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't make it less interesting if you use Swati names, for example. And then if you set your story in areas that are in Swaziland, areas that you are familiar with. All right, so that is an advice that can help you, and as far as authenticating your story is concerned. And then again, finally, we said that a narrative, there'll always be a purpose for you to tell that particular story. All right, there will be a purpose for you to tell the particular story, and then that purpose, it could be to entertain. That purpose would be to educate, maybe to inform, and we also mentioned that it may be to also create fear in that particular. So make sure that whenever you write the story, whenever you write that narrative, you achieve that particular purpose. All right, for our lesson therefore today, we're going to be looking at the mechanics, the art, the techniques that are used whenever you need to write a narrative composition or a narrative essay. What are the things that you need to make sure that you include? What are the things that the markers are looking for whenever you write a narrative essay? So whenever you write a narrative, these are the things that the examiners are expecting. You need to be able to create a story. That is the first thing that is important. We are looking at, or rather the examiners are looking at your ability to create a story. And then we said that for a narrative, the story does not necessarily have to be something that really happened, so it doesn't have to be a fact. It may be fiction. You may create, because it is a composition, which means that you have to compose something. All right, so that is the one thing that you are tested, whether you are able to do. And then of course, when you create that story, you obviously have a prompt. So make sure that whenever you create a story, you follow the prompt. And the prompt in this case, basically, it is the title. You'll know that for the titles, at times you are given a sentence that, okay, write a story that is based on this line, or that ends or begins with a particular line. And at times you'll be given the title straight away that, okay, fine, write a story based on this title. For example, an example of a title that you can use would say, this one actually is from a recent paper, For the Love of Money. So this can be a title. You could be asked to write a story based on this title. So make sure that when you create a story, you stick to the prompt. The prompt being the title, that you are writing a story that is based on what? For the love of money. That is the thesis of the whole story. That is what it's about. It is about the love of money, which means that money is going to be a key issue whenever you write that story. It is going to be a key element. And again, not just money, but there should be love for the money. All right? So whatever story that you create, you are then tested whether you will be able to do this, where you are guided, that create a story that is based on the love of money. Whatever else that happens, it is your own composition, but then this is merely what? The prompt that guides you. That whatever story that you create should be based on this. All right, so we continue from that one. This is one thing that you are tested for, whether you are able to use, or you are creative enough for that. And then again, when you tell the story, there are certain things that you need to do that are being tested there. And one of those things that are, again, being tested there is the fact that, are you able to use the English language accurately? So here, this is the accuracy We are looking at the accuracy of grammar. Of grammar. So you are tested whether you are accurate in the use of your English language. And then the grammar, of course, here, it is in the English language because that is the language of instruction that we are using. Of course, it is a second language to us, so you are tested whether you are able to use the English language accurately. Your grammatical structures are correct. When you talk of grammatical structures, there's a lot when it comes to that. We are talking about your sentence construction. For example, the structure of your sentences, your sentence construction. Is it a full sentence? Are you able to begin sentences with capital letters? Are you able to punctuate them correctly, use correct punctuation and everything? So basically, grammar is a key element that is being tested when it comes to your English language. Are you able to maintain certain tenses throughout your narrative essay? And by the way, whenever we write a narrative essay, generally the most common tense that we use, it's the past tense, because you are telling a story, and a story, it's not something that is to happen. A story, it's not something that is happening. A story is likely to be something that happened. So if it's something that happened, you are likely to use what? A past tense. Not to say that always that it uses a past tense, but then generally most narratives we use past tense, and it is easier for you to use the past tense, and especially the past perfect tense, because there's that tendency among learners to use, wrongly so, past participle tense. And the past participle tense, it is used, yes, but then it has got a certain way in which you have to use it, not just to use it anyhow. So again, let's continue. So the accuracy of grammar, it's important. And for you to get this correct, it is important that you proofread your work to be sure that your grammar is correct. Make sure proofreading is very, very important, because learners have got this tendency of just writing, and then when they finally finish writing the conclusion, put that full stop, and then they say it's done. In actual fact, whenever you have to proofread your work in a narrative, which is always, by the way, you have to do that at least 3 times. Read your narrative 3 times. At first, you'll be looking for grammatical structure, grammatical errors, and then again, you'll be looking at punctuation, you'll be looking at spelling mistakes and everything. So you can't just look out for those at the same time, but you need to take separate turns to look and correct each of those. So make sure that you have to proofread your work after every composition that you've written. Make sure that you proofread your work. Further, another thing that you are tested on, it's your ability to vary your sentences. So we look at sentence variation. It is important that when you write, you vary your sentences. All right, varying your sentences can come in different folds. One, when you vary your sentences, you can vary the length of your sentence. So the length of your sentences should be varied. Basically, we know that the length is determined by the structure of the sentence, because we know we've got what? We've got complex sentences. We also have simple sentences, and we have what is called a compound sentences. So in your writing, make sure that you vary the sentence, your sentences, that is the structures of your sentence. Have those complex sentences, have simple sentences, and make sure that you also have compound sentences that have got 2 maybe independent clauses. There you've got an independent clause and a subordinate clause. And then you also have, in a simple sentence, you just have 1 clause, which is an independent clause. So that is the one thing. So basically, it says the type of the sentence that you use, they should be varied. And then another thing that you need to do when we look at sentence variation still, the beginning of your sentences, vary it. Vary the beginning of sentences. This is basically to say that you need to maybe use an adverbial phrase. Begin a sentence with an adverbial phrase. So, which is one way of varying your beginning of sentences. So you can begin with an adverbial phrase, and make sure with adverbial phrases, the one thing that is always tricky is getting the punctuation right. Because whenever you begin with an adverbial phrase, there will be what? There will be a comma somewhere. For example, let's say you're going to write a sentence that begins with although. So if you begin a sentence with although, you're going to write whatever, although this is the case, and then there'll be a comma somewhere there, not a full stop. You can't have a full stop before a comma. So when you begin with that although, you'll have although something, then comma, you're going to finish off the sentence usually with the main clause, because that adverbial phrase is the subordinate. It can stand on its own. So make sure that you vary that beginning. They shouldn't be just a subject, verb, object. All of your sentences, make sure that you vary the beginning of your sentences. And then while still on that one, we continue. Again, we look at the third one that you need to look out for when you vary your sentences, the things that you need to do there. It is the structure of the sentence. And then the fourth one, it is okay, we've already talked about the length of the sentence. So let's just leave it there and then say that it is the structure of the sentence. So these are the things that you need to make sure that you take care of whenever you write. Vary your sentence length, vary the structures, vary everything about your sentences. The beginning, it shouldn't be just uniform in whatever that you write, because then it becomes not so convincing to the marker that you are able to use the language and you are proficient in the language. And then when we continue to it's the fourth point. We are still looking at what? We are looking at the mechanics of writing, the things that they'll be looking for in your writing. Maybe just before we do that, I'll need to make an example, because I think it punctuates clearly to you when there's something that has been written. Let's talk about, maybe we're looking at the variation of the sentence length. You are writing a composition. You want to tell us that you woke up in the morning, and then maybe you begin it from the time you wake up, all right? And then to tell us whatever the rest of the story. You may want to begin it like, all right, this would be the sentence, an example of the sentence. You want to say, it was 7 o'clock when I woke up, all right? So that is a simple sentence that we've just used. And then you vary the length and the type of the sentence. The next one says, soon after I have had my bath, comma, I had breakfast. So you see, this one has got two clauses that it uses. Soon after I've had my bath, which is an independent clause, and then you've got the dependent clause, which is the main one, I had breakfast. So this is the sentence variation we're talking about. And it is important that you always vary the length of your sentence and the type of sentences that you use, because it has that effect in your writing. It proves that you are able to write in the language. You have mastered the use of the English language in terms of written English. All right. So this is an example of a sentence variation, and in terms of length and in terms of the structure. Okay, again, continuing, we're getting to the fourth point while we are still looking at the mechanics of using the English language, or rather the mechanics of writing a narrative essay. You don't have to only vary your sentences, but you also have to vary your vocabulary. Make sure you vary your vocabulary. Here, you are required that as a learner, to be convincing enough, you use what is called precise vocabulary. So, or rather, we can say use precise terms. All right. So here, this is where you're given the chance to show off your knowledge of the language. All right. So in your use of what? Of your vocabulary. And it is a key thing. We don't want someone who's going to describe things in so many words when he could have used probably one word. An example would be, you write, I walked slowly, or they were walking slowly, which is another one, to mean the same thing. They were walking slowly. Here, walking slowly has got a precise term that you can use in the English language. You can use just one word to show, to mean the same thing, walking slowly, which can be what, whenever you walk slowly, we say that you are strolling. So that precise term basically means that. All right? Use precise terms in terms of your vocabulary. Instead of describing actions in so many words, you can just use one word that describes, that tells the whole story, all right, instead of using so many of those words. So make sure that your story, you use, your vocabulary is precise. It describes just what you want, all right, instead of using so many sentences or rather so many words to mean, to say something that you could have said maybe in a phrase or even just in one word. All right. So maybe another example of that would be, one may talk of instead of writing that there were a lot of people. So instead of this saying there were a lot of people, you can just use one word. And then instead of what? Of a lot of people there, you can substitute that one with just one word to show your proficiency in the language, of course, by using this one word and say there were multitudes of people. So these multitudes, it has got a more weight than saying a lot, because anyone can use maybe the word a lot instead of maybe talking, maybe describing the way that someone was, maybe you had to eat. You know, there's a way when you eat, maybe you are hurrying, all right, in your eating. And then because of whatever circumstance that is there. So even instead of maybe saying, so you can have that sentence there, I quickly ate my sandwich. It's easy. You can just use one word to say the very same thing. And that will be to gobble. So these are the precise terms we are talking about. And then again, still on eating, you can again, if you eat something and you are enjoying it, then you can use, for example, this word, to devour on something. So this is important that we do what? We are able to always use what is called, or rather what we say are the precise terms. This is one way of making sure that you vary your vocabulary, the way that you use, instead of describing things in so many words, just use one word that is so precise to describe the action, because you don't have to necessarily describe the action in so many words. Just use one word, and that one word says it all. All right. So you are tested for your ability to do what? To vary your sentence, or rather to vary your vocabulary. And again, getting on to the fifth point now, number 5. The fifth point would be, in your writing, you are expected to be able to organize your work. Are you able to organize your work? And then when you talk about organization of your work, this basically gets us to paragraphing. So this gets us to paragraphing. Are you able to paragraph correctly? Remember, each paragraph has got a certain role. You don't just paragraph because you feel like, well, I need to paragraph now. So this takes us to paragraphing. Make sure that your paragraphing is what it's supposed to be. Here are maybe the moments where you have to paragraph, the reasons why we paragraph, when to paragraph. Let's look at those. The first one would be we paragraph because maybe there's been a change. In whatever the story that you're telling, then if there's a change of course, then, or in a change of course, basically this means there's a new incident. Things take a different turn from the way they've been proceeding. So if there's a new incident, you will need to paragraph because now you are telling us about a new incident. So that is one reason why we have to paragraph. And then again, if there's a different speaker, or I'd say if there's a new speaker there, then again you need to paragraph a new speaker. It may be a new point or rather a different point of view. Maybe you introduced us to someone, then when you say that, well, then you're talking about maybe your parent, your mother, or your father, or whoever relative it is, and then you want to tell us more about that one, then you're going to use maybe a new paragraph. And then again, if there's been a change of mood, this is when to paragraph, when there's a change of mood. And the change of mood would be something like, for example, let me make just a quick example and say, suddenly a police officer entered. So this one can be a new paragraph because there's been that change of mood. We know what associations we have for a police officer. We expect something whenever there's something that is wrong that was happening there, and then the police officer arrives. Or even if it's not a police officer, it could be, again, maybe the doctor arrived. And then this is obviously a change of mood because there'll be expectations. All right. And then on rare occasions, all right, on rare occasions, you may paragraph or begin a new paragraph because maybe the one that you've been writing, you see that, no, this one is just getting too long. So you may paragraph. So these are instances that you have to avoid whenever you have to write a paragraph and maybe start a new paragraph because the previous one is too long. Make sure that each paragraph is a development of the plot. All right. So it takes us to the next level of your writing. So that is in terms of organization. You need to organize your work, that in terms of paragraphing. And you will won't be able to paragraph correctly if you have not done this one important thing, which is called planning. You need to plan your work. All right? Make sure that, as we said in the previous lesson, that your work or your story should have a clear beginning. And somewhere, obviously, it is going to have the middle, and there will be the end. So in your planning, make sure that you tell us what happens in the first place, all right? How is the story going to start? What are the things that happens first? And then what happens next, okay? And in the middle, what is it that happens? And then finally, how do things get resolved? Okay, how do things get resolved? Because like we said, that you should begin with maybe some kind of a conflict. We're still going to discuss this in this very same lesson. And then move towards a resolution of the conflict. And then what happens in between, before the resolution of the conflict, they make sure, or rather constitutes the middle of your writing. So planning is key. You cannot just think as you write. It is fatal to do that. don't think as you write. Be sure, before you begin writing, be sure what is the story going to end like? What outcome, what is the ending of the story going to be? And what are the details that I'm going to include there in the story? All right, so planning is very, very important. It is an important part. It ensures that your work looks organized. And organization is one other aspect or factor that is being tested as far as writing is concerned. All right, again, moving right along, we're going to the 6th point. After organization, you are then tested for your language. Here, this is your language usage. Are you able to use the language correctly? And then language usage here, it means that you can use words in their literal meaning. And then again, are you able to use words in their non-literal meaning? Here, when we talk of non-literal meaning, we are basically, the literal meaning will be the denotative meaning of certain words. So are you able to use words denotatively? All right, so that is denotatively there. And then, or else are you able to use the words maybe connotatively? That is the connotations that certain words have. And then connotative meanings, this basically means that in your writing, you will include things like similes. You're going to include maybe metaphors in your writing. And then you're going to include personifications. So all that figurative language that you can use, then that's the language usage. How comfortable are you with the use of your English language? So that is one thing that is expected. And then maybe I'll just, this is still part of grammar, but I need to separate it just to make sure that you get it right. Then there I'll have spellings. That's another aspect. Are you able to spell correctly? So it's spellings, and then also there'll be punctuation. You need to punctuate your work correctly. All right. So make sure you make sure you attend to this. You pay much attention and you focus on your spellings and also on your punctuation. All right. And then one golden rule whenever you write in the English language, one golden rule that you need to always keep in mind. As much as we said that you should vary your sentence structures and the length, one golden rule is that avoid too long sentences. Because somehow, somewhere, you are going to lose the meaning. So this is a golden rule. Avoid too long sentences. Then the question is, how long is too long? All right? Read the question. Whenever you write a sentence, read it. And then where you get tired and you feel like you need a pause, then, and there's no punctuation there, that means that sentence is too long. All right, so that is how I'd say you can tell whether a sentence is too long or not. But that depends generally on maybe what is being taught, what your teachers tell you. Usually I tell my students that a sentence should not go beyond 2 lines. At the most, it should be 2 lines, not beyond that. All right, so that is that. And then these are the mechanics, the things that we look at, the examiners that look at, the things that you are tested whenever you write a narrative compositions that we've just looked at. All right, let's look at some examples that we can use. Maybe for the introduction and maybe the art of narrating now. That whenever you narrate, we want to narrate, what are the things that you should go through personally? Okay, for now we're going to go for a break, and then when we come back, we're going to look at the art of narrating and maybe also some examples of introductions that you can do, the different types of introductions that we can use for our narrative writing. We'll be right back. I get it.
sit.
Before the break, we were looking at the mechanics of writing a narrative essay. What are the things that you are tested on as a learner there whenever you have to write? What are the things that you need to show that you are able to do? And then we looked at those. And then now we're going to look at the art of narrating. That whenever you narrate, what are the things that you need to consider? Things that can, maybe that may help you write better essays. All right, can make things simple, because at times it's so difficult to come up with a certain topic, for example, or maybe to come up with a story that is interesting, because our teachers, they always tell us that tell a story that is interesting. There should be suspense and everything. But then how do you come up with that? That is the problem. So let's look at the art of narrating now. We are looking at the art of narration to ensure that you write better narrative essays. The one thing that is a must, because we say that your narrative should be interesting. It should be something, your work should make sure that it captures the attention of the reader, all right? Doesn't have to lose interest at any point, all right? And then we said that to do that, you have to create suspense. All right? You have to create suspense where the reader will always want to find out what happens next, what happens next, what happens next. And then that is an art that is being tested, it is expected also from you. So to keep your narration interesting and also making sure that you create suspense, there's one important thing that you need to do. Narrative compositions that will maybe most of the time ensure that your composition, your story is interesting and somehow it has good suspense. It's when you begin your story with a conflict. Begin your story with a conflict, or somewhere there should be a conflict there. And then a conflict, or at times we can also use the word that there should be a problem. And this problem and a conflict maybe also equates to something like there should be mystery. There should be a mystery somewhere. And we are not so sure how things are going to turn out. All right? And then once you do this, you're going to write. And then in your writing, you make sure that you are working towards what? A resolution of the conflict. Your writing should ensure that you work towards a resolution of that conflict, or where the problem is solved to a certain solution here of the problem that is there. Or maybe you give an insight to that particular mystery that you created in the first place. So if you begin your story with a conflict, then it makes it easy to follow, and it makes it interesting in the sense that as a reader, I would want to find out what finally happened, because that's the one thing that keeps the reader interested in reading whatever that you have written. So make sure that you avoid straightforward, maybe introductions. Something from the introduction, one can just tell, okay, fine, this is what happened. All right? So it is important that you begin your story with some kind of conflict or a mystery. So don't necessarily give it all out in the beginning. All right? So that you work towards that resolution of your conflict that you have created there. Maybe let me go to an example of certain introductions that we can use to make sure that we create that conflict, or we keep our narrative very interesting. So right here before me, I've got, rather in front of your screens, you've got different narratives or introductions to narratives. So these are examples of introductions to narrative essays that maybe let's look at them, whether they do have that conflict or problem or some mystery involved in that one. Okay, we have already talked about this one, this title, which is For the Love of Money, which is from a recent paper that was written in Form 5. Okay, so it is For the Love of Money. That is the title, although I hope it is visible. So here it says, For the Love of Money. This is one introduction that was written by a student. From as early as Sunday school, one has always been told that money is the root of all evil. So here, this student began with what? With a general statement, something that we all know. So this is a general statement that he or she began with. So it's a general statement. From as early as Sunday school, one has always been told that money is the root of all evil. For the love of money, some would work until dawn, and others, like me, for the intensified love of money, would trade their souls. This one, when you say, I would trade my soul, it means that it shows that this person is so committed to whatever that is going to bring money. So when one can trade his or her soul. And then this somehow shocks. It's a shocking revelation, or rather it's a shocking confession, I'd say. So this is shocking. And then this is the interesting way, again, of introducing a story. When you introduce a story in a shocking, with some form or some kind of shock, that, oh, this is how it is. This is such extent. You can go to such extent. For the love of money, you can trade your soul. So, and then we want to find out then that how, therefore, did you carry that? Did you do that? What is it that you did that says, maybe that says to you, you can trade your soul? And again, you have began with that general statement where you said that money is the root of all evil. So again, as a reader, I'm now anticipating. You said that money, it is a root of all evil. And then again, you said that for the love of money, others work from dawn, or maybe they work until dawn. Some others, like the writer here, for the intensified love of money, they would trade their souls. It means that basically they'll do anything to get money. And then I'm starting to smell a red somewhere, saying, okay, fine, something must have gone wrong here, because you've begun with the statements that money, it is the root of all evil. So this, it is an interesting one. It is an interesting introduction. And again, another one that we can look at for the same title, For the Love of Money. This is another introduction. It's not a continuation. This is introduction number 2. So this is 1, and then this is introduction 2, not paragraph 2. All right. So we are still looking at introductions. So this is an introduction. So here, money is legal tender for every nation in the world. People work because they need money. One cannot definitely live without money, which is why it is important. However, it is dangerous to love money because it can bring you many problems. This is a straightforward introduction. It is just a general introduction into the topic for the love of money. General terms, money is legal tender for every nation in the world. People work because they need money. One cannot definitely live without money, which is why it is important. However, it changes everything. This one changes everything, because there it sounded like, okay, too general. Okay, fine, we know that. One cannot live without money and everything. It is important in the world. It is a legal tender for every nation. But then immediately you put that one, that concession the phrase, and says, however, it is dangerous to love money because it can bring you problems. You have included danger, we have included problems. Then as a reader, we begin to anticipate, did something go wrong what are the problems that can be brought about by money, and then especially when you love it. So we start anticipating, we start expecting. It is not as interesting as the first one maybe, but then again, it is also still what? Accepted, because it does present that sort of a problem. There's that stimuli for whatever that you're going to write about. All right, so this is one other introduction that does that. Maybe let's go to another one. A different title this time. The title is Stocked. So still, we are on what? We are looking at introductions to narratives. These are examples of introductions to narrative, and make sure that your introduction should be captivating. It should be interesting. Just like every morning, I patiently stood in the line at Riverside Cafe, waiting for my skimmed double latte espresso. All right? There it was. Well, there it was, which there should be a comma there. There it was. That strange feeling again. The hair at the back of my neck rose. Goosebumps suddenly appeared on my skin. Paranoia set in. Was somebody watching? This, I'd say of the two, or rather of the three that we've looked at, this is bound to be the best one that creates interest, that is so captivating. All right? Which is another strategy that you can use when you write introductions. There should be what you can use or begin with a question. And obviously, if you begin with a question, you are going to take time in answering the question. In fact, you are not going to directly answer the question, but then in your story, you will be answering that question by revealing things that happened. Here, the question says, was somebody watching? So we don't expect that the next paragraph is going to be, yes, somebody was watching. No. You are not answering the question directly, but then instead in your writing, you'll be writing to answer this question. And then after we have read your essay, then as readers, will have been answered the question whether there was somebody watching. Okay. And again, why do you associate this feeling that you have, this strange feeling that you have with someone watching? Remember, the title of the composition, the narrative, it is stalked. We know what stalking is. When someone follows you wherever you go, and at first you are unaware of that person, they've got a motive, a certain motive of following you, and then maybe at time you'll feel, at the beginning you'll feel, okay, maybe it's a coincidence or something. You just let it go, but then when you are stalked, you'll constantly have that person following your back, and then he or she avoids by all means for you to see that he or she is following you. So basically that is stalking. So this is the introduction to that particular essay that is entitled Stalked. I'll go over it again. Just like every morning, I patiently stood in the line at Riverside Cafe, waiting for my skimmed double latte espresso. So here, another technique in writing a narrative is that you need to use description, or not necessarily descriptions. Yes, descriptions should be there, but give us details. Give us details. It's what we are looking for. So here, you're not just waiting for a coffee. It's not just saying, okay, one day I was standing in the queue at a restaurant to get my coffee. Full stop. There are no details there. There are no details. Give us details, just like every morning. So it's something that you are used to doing. It's something that you are a regular at doing. I patiently stood. Not just I was standing there in the line, but I patiently stood in the line. The word patiently there, which is an adverb, gives us what? More information. It tells us a lot that you patiently stood. It means that, okay, fine, there were a lot of people there in the line, or in the queue. I stood in the line at Riverside Cafe, waiting for my skimmed double latte espresso. Okay, fine. It's not all of us know what a skimmed double latte espresso is, but then give us some sort of details. If it's your rooibos black tea, then it's fine. It's something that you're familiar to. If it's ice cream, you say that my vanilla ice cream cone, whatever it is, but then give us those details of what is it that you were waiting for. So again, there it was. That strange feeling again. So here, this student begins with this, begins the composition with the introduction that suggests that as readers, we should know by this time that there was a feeling that she has been going through. And it's not the first time she or he is feeling this. But then he says, there it was, that strange feeling again. All right. And then here, this arouses interest in us. Because when you say that strange feeling again, okay, you say, okay, it's not the first time we have this. You have this feeling. What is happening with you? And then he now describes, the hair at the back of my neck rose. All right? Goosebumps suddenly appeared on my skin. And then paranoia set in. So paranoid. Why are you paranoid? We start asking ourselves questions. And then artfully, she or he completes this introduction with the question, was somebody watching? And then he's going to take it from there. So this is another good technique that can always work for you, but of course, depending on how you then get to answer the question when you begin in the introduction with a question. All right? And make sure that you answer the question in writing, not necessarily directly. And then another introduction, which is introduction number 2 for the same topic, stopped. This one begins with an direct speech. And most of the learners, they like using direct speech. You'd find help there in the beginning, and then say this was what. Remember in our previous lesson, we say that it is important that you use direct speech, yes, but make sure that you punctuate it correctly. You need to use dialogue in your writing. It is an art. It's a technique that you are supposed to use. It's something that it's something that makes your essay rather very interesting. Use dialogue. And then here it says, oh no, this can't be happening. Him again? Could this be a coincidence or what? Something is amiss here. And then you punctuate correctly, you close the quotes. All right. So this could be something that the writer is saying to someone, or these could just be his thoughts. Because that dialogue, it is accepted that dialogue could be your thoughts. You are thinking aloud. All right? You're thinking out loud. So your thoughts, you can include them as direct speech. Okay? In quotes. That is what is going on in your mind at that particular time. So for this one, you can just tell, okay, maybe this is something that is going on in his or her mind. Oh no, this can't be happening. Him again. Could this be a coincidence or what? And it has been appropriately punctuated with that question mark because it's a question. Could this be a coincidence or what? Something is amiss here. So now, close quotes, and then continues. I could not help myself but think that way. So it has been revealed that, okay, these are thoughts. I could not help myself but think that way. It was the third time seeing this person at different locations on the same day. Hesitantly, I went straight to confront him. Or rather hesitantly, yes, it is hesitantly, I went straight to confront him. I'm interested in this one. Seeing this person. He said, this person. It has not been revealed again, whether this is a man or this is a boy or whatever, but he says, it was the third time seeing this person again. And seeing this person at different locations on the same day, and then hesitantly, so I went straight to confront him. This adverb here gives us again the description, it describes, it gives us more information, the details, and how at first you were so hesitant in, or rather hesitant in doing what? In going to approach this person. You're doubtful whether you should do that, or you should just keep to yourself and say, no, maybe it's a coincidence and everything. So hesitantly, I went straight to confront him. And then now we want to find what, not that I went to talk to him, to confront him. All right? So that again gives us expectations. It creates interest in this. If the introduction is like this, then we'll be definitely interested in going on, in reading and finding out that who is this mystery person? Why are you seeing the person for the third time at different locations on the same day? Why is the person following you? What is it that is amiss about this person? So these are examples of introductions that create interest, and the way you can begin the introductions. Basically, yes, in an introduction, you need to set the scene. And setting the scene does not necessarily mean telling us about the weather, because that is one strategy or technique, if I can call it that way, that has been overused, where as we read your compositions, your narrative compositions, you keep telling us that it was a Sunday afternoon and the wind was blowing from the east to the west, the birds were singing in the sky and everything. You think you are setting the scene. Setting the scene does not necessarily mean you telling us the weather. Yes, it is important that you tell us somewhere, find a way of including that in your writing and as you write the body. Okay, so now, then finally, you need to get into your body of your writing, that is of your composition, and then make sure there's that link sentence that links that introduction to the rest of the body. You get to the first paragraph and then you tell us that, okay, fine, after this has happened, what then happens? It all began like this way. So again, I think you've been told that there's two different ways that you can begin your narrative compositions. It could be using a flashback or just straight chronological order of the events. All right. So in your writing, whatever in the in the body, you should make sure that you create the suspense. And then creating suspense, basically, you achieve this by withholding the resolution of the conflict. All right. Don't just tell us there in the second paragraph that, okay, fine, this person was so and so. All right, because we then get to lose interest in that one. So make sure you withhold, you withhold the details there, and then by so doing, you are creating suspense in that one. And then you move, and then make sure you employ all the other mechanics of the language that we used, using precise terms in describing actions instead of maybe using the usual ways of writing. All right. So that is also important. And then that important art of narrating, which is showing instead of telling. So that is important. You need to show and not tell. Show, not tell. So this is the important art of narrating. Show through your writing instead of telling us that someone is angry. Rather, describe the actions of the person so that we see that the person was angry. All right. So that is all we have time for today. Hopefully, after this lesson, you're going to write better narrative compositions. All right. So in our next lesson, we'll be looking at descriptive compositions while we still prepare for the coming examination. Until then, have a good viewing and good night.